I'm Erica Sadun, and I'm so honored to be here today. I'm going to talk today about swift evolution, and more specifically, about how you can make your voice heard in the process. Now, a lot of people have turned out of swift evolution for many reasons, or they never really got involved in the first place. And today I want to convince you why you should tune into swift evolution, why it matters, and why you are an important part of this process. And let me remind you about some key truths. And the first key truth I want to start with is that you deserve nice things. You are important. Your workflow matters. And Swift as a language exists to serve you. Yeah, it is driven by Apple, but you matter as a developer. And you deserve nice things. You deserve APIs that are clear, that are elegant and concise. The Swift standard library has clear and exciting patterns that should help you build better apps using less code and provide greater maintainability over time. Your projects and your libraries should work well across all of Apple's platforms and beyond. Your Swift code should be robust and it should be flexible, whether you're writing for the iPhone or the iPad, the watch or the TV, or even Linux or Windows, because Swift does work on all those platforms. The Swift language should deliver a beautiful cross-platform development experience. The Swift language should minimize your pain points, not elevate them. Whether it's about file private or dangling commas in source control diffs, your development pain matters. You are an important stakeholder in this language, and your development needs and your desires can and should be heard as part of the language evolution process. Swift should not just be a thing that happens to you. You can impact the language, and your voice is important. Swift is an open source language, and Swift evolution describes the public-facing side that solicits, evaluates, and implements changes to the language over time. The Swift forums are the primary meeting place to develop, refine, and vote on language change proposals. And the forums also provide support for language questions, and they offer a place to follow some of the most important community projects such as SwiftLint, Katura, Sorcery, and more. At the heart of Swift evolution, there's a core team, and this is made up of a mix of Apple and non-Apple participants. And the core team has the final say on how and whether a change will be added to the language and or the standard library. And right now there is a very high bar to make changes, especially breaking changes, because we don't want to break the language anymore. Language stability is now a major part of the evolution. And at the same time, the core team has laid out a roadmap because there is a vision there and major features that have not yet been adopted into the language. And these include variadic generics, concurrency, and enhanced DSL capabilities like the ones you've been seeing in Swift UI. Whenever a major language change is proposed, it enters a review process on the Swift forums. And during the review period, the Swift development community is invited to participate. to read the proposal and give their feedback about how the change will affect them and why they do or do not support those changes. And I'm not going to pretend these forums aren't high volume. Information overload has been a really big part of participation burnout. Between bike shedding and blue sky painting, and I'm talking about the kind that does not involve Bob Ross, and really on Swift forums there are no happy little accidents. But between all of these, there are lots and lots of reasons that developers will leave or they won't get involved in the first place because it's so daunting. And many of the reasons devolve to developer realities. And this is to say, lots of people's livelihoods, your livelihood depends on producing code, resolving tickets, handling triage. And many people like you don't have space available to dedicate to the time-consuming back and forth of the heavily trafficked, detail-crazy evolution process. Now, I'm kind of turning you off of things here, but I want to explain why it's so important that despite your developer realities, you get involved. Now, yes, you have other priorities. You may lack flexibility to spend time paying attention to Swift outside of using it for programming. And that's a tangible and real loss to the Swift language and the Swift community. Because when you consider how much the language touches every part of your development work, you should consider how much a little effort on your part could pay you back. I love this picture. Swift wants you to be part of the evolution process. And even if Swift has hurt you before, treated you badly, even if Swift has messed up your code base, it's really important that you, as developers, be part of the system. Because if you don't, then Swift becomes something that happens without you and without your needs. And it's something that happens without the things that you want and your concerns. And none of these are going to be properly considered or addressed as the language moves forward unless it just happens because somebody else jumped in and they overlap with you. You yourself are the best protector of your needs and your priorities in coding. And that's because, unlike language designers, as coders, you are invested in the day-to-day use of the language. You have specific, real, lived, tangible experience about what works in the language and what does not. You are the language hero. You are out there in the trenches using the language every day. You know your pain points, and you can imagine how a particular change is going to affect your coding, interact with your particular architecture, whichever ones you're using, and will affect or promote or hurt your code maintainability over time. As a daily language consumer, you have this lived experience. You know where the language breaks down. And in addition to filing bugs, by the way, let me just stop here and bring this up. Thank you, everybody, for submitting your bugs and filing your issues. But you have that bone-deep knowledge of how the language supports you. And that knowledge is exactly the critical knowledge that the evolution process needs to evaluate the impact of a proposed change. So I want you to be part of the solution. And I want to talk for a little bit about what it takes to become part of the solution and part of the evolution process. Now, in addition to the Swift forums, proposals are posted at this GitHub.io site for Swift evolution. This site provides an easy one-step overview of all the active, accepted, and rejected reviews. You will see dates for any things that's scheduled or is in active review, and every title links to the proposal in question. In addition, you can check the status of a proposal, see whether it's been accepted, rejected. You can see who authored it. There is a link directly to the proposal. It's a really handy clearance site for visiting to find out what's going on in Swift evolution at this exact minute. Every proposal has a review thread in the Swift forums. And you see this one is locked, which happens when the review period ends. Any proposal that is active review will not be locked. And every review, every single one, has this exact text attached to it. And this is the jumping off point for analyzing and evaluating the proposal. The core team wants to know, what is your evaluation? Do you support it or not? Is this a significant enough change to warrant affecting the Swift language? Because if it is truly trivial, then it's not really worth the investment of all the things that accompany a language change. So we need to know, not only is it a good proposal, but is it a significant one? The next one is the Swifty question, which is it Swifty? Does it fit well into what Swift feels like? Does it fit well into the current direction of the language? If there is something that's a really cool thing to add, but it's not particularly Swifty, then it really shouldn't be adopted. The next point has to do with other languages. Does this fit in the wider scope of other languages? If you've used many other languages and you've seen similar features, the core team, they want to know, does this represent what modern languages are doing in this space? And finally, to get a sense, a temperature of how meaningful your proposal is, they're looking to see, how much effort did you put into this? Did you just take a quick glance? Or did you go to in depth? Did you try the feature out in a sample build? They're looking for all these points in order to have a good in-depth proposal review. That doesn't mean you have to spend hours and hours and hours reviewing a proposal, but that these are the points that the core team specifically is looking for. So, a good proposal, what's involved? Any real-world impact analysis, and that is something that you can bring to the table. That is not necessarily something someone who's just a language designer is going to bring to the table. Understanding impact is hugely important, and if you can take your real-world experience and explain how the change affects it, that gives an enormous amount of weight to your opinion. Insight from experienced users is also important because many of these changes actually are put into development builds where you can try them out and you can see how it actually works. That's a wonderful thing to bring to your review. And here's the most important thing about good proposal reviews. They're opinionated. And I can't emphasize this part enough because reviews are not meant to be a clinical analysis. They should go straight to the gut. How will the proposal affect you and your code base? Could the design be improved? Say so. Does it pass the sniff test? Be honest. Be open. And if you have to be brutal with your opinions, because you are criticizing a change that you have a deep and vested interest. And it's one that affects the tool set that, for most of you who are listening to this talk today, have as a core part of making your living, putting food on your table, and adding a roof over your head, because this is going to directly affect you. And because of that, I want you to go in there with that gut and really be honest about how a proposal will impact your code base. So these are the points that make up a good proposal review. What makes a bad proposal? Well, this is sort of like the worst proposal review you can give, +1. It is a horrible and unhelpful review. There is nothing worse or less helpful than +1 or -1. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're telling the community nothing but you like it or you don't like it. You're not saying why the proposal succeeds or why it fails to support your needs. What you're doing is treating the evolution process as a popularity contest, which it isn't. The core team is asking you to provide evidence about why the proposal should be accepted or why it should be rejected. And a thumbs up or a thumbs down vote just doesn't meet that bar. It is essentially a useless proposal review. For most people, a quality review does not have to be a long essay. And you have time limitations, so make the most of the time you do have. A review doesn't have to involve hours of your time, but it should motivate why you are for or against the proposal. So, explain why you are supporting it or not supporting it. And it only takes a few sentences to really get your core concept across. And if you don't have the time to go further than that, by doing a few succinct, thoughtful sentences, you can get your point across with a minimum of time investment. Good proposals are concrete. And if you're looking to have more impact in the review process, then offer some concrete examples. Give descriptions, or, if you have code, show some code and describe the benefits or detriments of the proposal. The more concrete you are, this will affect how I do this sorting. This will affect how I do my database access. Things like that. Things that take the real world and show the proposal in the light of that real world experience are always going to be more valuable. And this is a really important point about good reviews. Take a few moments and read the proposal, not the summary, not the name, the title, not just the introduction paragraph. Go ahead and read the thing. Proposals generally are not very long. They are very short white papers that people put together that have a design, they have a motivation, they have a proposed solution, and they have some sort of support for why they think this is the appropriate approach. So when you participate in a proposal review, you're not rating the name of the proposal or the introductory paragraph. When you participate, just read it. It won't be long, and go through at least the motivation in the design sections, because you need to know what you're voting on, and you need to make sure to mention how much of this you've invested time into. And if you have followed previous discussions about this topic, whether in the forums or off the forums, mention it. Because an informed review is going to weigh much more heavily in the evaluation process than a light read or scan. That doesn't mean a light read or scan is not valuable. It is. It just doesn't weigh as much. Weighing the merits. So, when you're evaluating your evolution proposal, ask, is this problem significant enough to merit a change to the entire Swift language? Now, if this change touches your development in many places throughout your programming day, it's going to be a far more valuable change than if you use a feature once or twice a year. Because Swift doesn't need to be cluttered with a million enhancements that are only used occasionally. If you compare, for example, Swift to Kotlin, you'll see that Swift is a much more concise language. Now, there are people who will argue saying that Swift should have more nice things in it, and even if you don't use it on a daily basis, that having that tool available when you reach for it will be of value. And it's going to be up to you, because you are the one who is writing this evaluation, this review of the merit of a proposal. So it's up to you to think about how much impact will this change have on you specifically, and what is that impact worth? Is it Swifty? Over time, Swift has established its own culture and its own feel. So I want you to ask yourself, does this change feel right? Does it fit with the direction of where the Swift language has been going? Because no matter how cool a feature is, Swift is in Python, and it's not Rust, and it's not C#. Any new feature should feel natural and native to the language. And as you're considering similar features in other languages or third-party libraries, bring those experiences to your review in role models. If you feel that a package or a language or a library has implemented this better already, say so. If you recognize a feature that sounded cool on paper but didn't really work in practice, say that too, because experiences with other implementations are a great basis for supporting your vote with some meaningful, concrete context. So to wrap up my rant, Swift isn't just something that happens to you. You deserve a voice, and you deserve a say in how this mission-critical language affects your work. And it's not enough to just talk to your friends over coffee or to tweet about changes, and it's not enough to write a blog post. The only way to be heard meaningfully in terms of the Swift evolution process is to respond to the core team in the forum thread during review periods. And that is how you can make your voice heard, and that is how you make a difference. So I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity today to talk to you and preach a little about a topic that's near to my heart. I will be happy to answer your questions, and thank you so much for listening to me.